for your presence and the fact that you were on time, right? I mean, that's what you're doing when you just say favorite, right? And so it was a great way to build a little bit of a personal relationship with these students that I really wouldn't have otherwise been able to do.
And another thing, this capstone class is all done in groups. And if you've ever incorporated group work into your class, you know how much students love it. So, you know, it really, I think it increased the love of the groups, and they actually connected a little bit better.
Yeah.
Just doing things like this, it really, you know, brings those students together a little bit more. And I don't think this past capstone they tweeted. And
No, well, I'm going to talk about that.
Yeah. Okay.
So, so this is me replying back to in week 6 of the first of the 2 terms. They have to do this an investor pitch with us. And one of the students, this student here, had tweeted something about, you know, wish us luck, we're presenting our investor pitch this week or something like that. And I wrote back and said, you know, to her, can you believe we get paid to listen to all these great ideas? Thanks, and this is another student, for the hometown research. So this student, when he did his investor pitch, he had found out what town I was from, and he had done an intro that specifically referenced my hometown in South Georgia. And I was pretty blown away by that, because I had told them, listen, you're selling yourself. And so when he did that, I thought, you know, this is a great way for me to give him public recognition. Good job, right? And then here, replying back to this student, it's our pleasure, we enjoy hearing your ideas. Again, she was saying it was great to pitch our ideas to the investors. And then here, again, affirming the students' knowledge. So we've got students, this was during a different, I think this was during a different presentation, not the Bob Shelley presentation. The students were asking a lot of really great questions. And so some of what I was doing here was just kind of giving them an affirmation on that. So Amy had asked a really great question about integrating restaurants into hotels. So the challenge with this is this doesn't mean a whole lot if you're not Amy or me. And that's probably where, like, I would say these are, in terms of being a public feed that other people might catch on to the conversation and join in. Because I followed a whole bunch of hotels and restaurants, but over time I had random people interested in hospitality following me, as in following this user here, right? Which is kind of interesting because, like, oh, I guess they're catching on to the fact that I tweet a lot about hotels and restaurants. So these don't necessarily mean something in the larger conversation, they just meant something to this student. So this may not be the best use of Twitter, but it was a great way to just be able to affirm to the students. Again, I was doing this while we're in class, right? While there's a guest speaker, I'm over here doing all this, because I can't stop the guest speaker and say, oh, wait, Amy, good question, right? Because you can't always do that. And so, again, just another example here, me replying back. And then this is really the way you want to, I think when it comes to affirming student knowledge, this is really the best way to do it, which is this, to do what's called RT, a retweet. So Amy had tweeted a New York Times article on hospitality. And anytime they would tweet an article, I would look at that article. Anytime they tweeted an article, I would check out that article. And if it was something that I thought really would help the rest of the class, I would retweet it, which meant all the rest of the class following me and anyone else following me would see that article. And I would often say something like, hey, CEOs, because the teams create CEOs and CFOs and things like that. I would say, hey, CEOs, you got to read this on leadership. And then it would be retweet, whoever had tweeted that. So that was a great way of saying, like, what you found was valuable enough that I think it's worth sharing with everyone else. And I didn't do that with every single article. Just the ones that I really thought, hey, this is great. I personally, if I had found this, would have tweeted this out to everyone. That, I think, is a good example of affirming student knowledge, whereas some of this other stuff is a little more, probably a little better suited for maybe just an after-class conversation. So again, following a great way to affirm their knowledge. So a few things that can happen that affirm them. One is they can pick up followers. So I picked up followers. So just to make sure everybody understands the nomenclature. It's kind of like in Facebook when you're friends with someone, right? Or in LinkedIn when you're linked to someone. In Twitter, people can follow you. You don't have to follow them back, right? But they can follow you, and if they follow you, it means that they'll see your information in their feed. So just a real quick, I'll switch over to, did you close my tab?
No.
Oh, because I'm in Firefox. Okay. So if anybody's following me, if they click on me, so you'll see I have 211 followers. And so if they click on my tweets here, so this right here, what you're seeing, these are all the people I follow. So I follow Entrepreneur, Skoll Foundation, et cetera, et cetera. And if somebody sees my feed, and then Cheryl is over here, I guess we both get the AT&T ads. Yeah. We'll come back to that a little bit later when we're doing the exercises. So one way that you can get affirmation is when people choose to follow you. My ego is always just a little bit pumped up when I get that email saying so-and-so is now following you. Now, an example for me recently is I just went to a conference called Good Food Financing that was over at UIC last week. And I tweeted a lot during that conference, and I used the conference hashtag. And that'll be something we'll show you later when we're teaching you how to do this. I picked up at least 10 new followers because people who were searching the same hashtag that I was using at that conference. They saw, oh, wait, okay, here's a person who tweets things about corporate responsibility and slow food movement and all this kind of stuff. I'm going to follow her. She might share something that's interesting to me, and that's what I do. I sometimes follow other people. So that affirms that you're a little bit of an expert, or at least can be for a moment on Twitter. Retweeting, so if I'm following you and you tweet something that I think is really interesting, I retweet it, you get credit for it, and it goes out to my network as well. So when we would retweet students' tweets, that would be a way to affirm them. You can favorite it, which is kind of like in Facebook when you hit like. If somebody tells a funny joke or something, you say like. And then you can do a response, and you saw examples of how I responded back to students and said, thanks, we enjoyed this, or something like that. And then starting a hashtag trend, which I think we'll go into more when we talk about how to do this yourself. And then this is a bonus that I want to share. So companies, a lot of what social media is about marketing, right? So yes, it's a way for people to connect. I mean, we know does everybody here use Facebook? So you know what Facebook is for, and it's a connection with friends, but you also know that you see ads, right? And you also know that companies use this for marketing. So a bonus was that these students who are building out business plans for mixed-use property, they began to create Twitter accounts and Facebook pages for their companies. And they would tweet out things that would make sense as if they were, this is a hypothetical company, but they would tweet out to the world things that this company would tweet out. So, the morning hangover packet, which was a package that this particular hotel was going to offer to its guests when they had stayed a weekend, and they came in for like a weekend thing. So, the morning hangover packet, what a creative plan by the WIT. Oh, sorry, here they're referencing one of their competitors actually. Producing energy, sound interesting and efficient, so solar energy, so they were all about going green with their hotel. So that's the kind of stuff that they would tweet out about the industry, but we also have examples of where they would tweet out sort of hypothetical news of what was going on in the hotel. Yeah. This weekend, excited to welcome, so-and-so band in our lobby bar or something like that. So they
Which
were
would
starting
really
to
confuse the
yeah.
real industry.
Yeah.
Where's this place?
Well, there were a few times when they created, I mean, it's one thing when they create their own independent boutique type hotel, but sometimes they latch on to like a Hyatt or a Hilton or something, and we're like, that's probably illegal. We should really tell them not to do that. So Cheryl, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about like our results and chart here.
So, well, these are the Casey Camp results, and you remember we're talking about the spikes of postings. So we used an aggregator software called Twitonomy. So, and it was like $200 an entire year, which we still have a few months left on.
Oh, right.
So that we could actually get all the statistics from all these hashtags, the 13 hashtags that we were following, and all of our users, our student users. And if you are a stalker, oh my gosh, what a great way to follow anybody and see exactly what they're tweeting. So, but this was really kind of a great way to get the statistics for this study so that we could actually confirm that, you know, what we think and feel is true and that it is. So you can see that the purple bars are the instructor and the orange are the students. So you can see that, okay, the instructor, Aurora, was tweet, 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 and then all of a sudden, boom, this large amount of tweets, that was probably
That was the visit, the
yeah.
weekend that they did the visit around the city.
Yeah.
Tour, yeah.
So they were able to, you know, actually tweet a lot. And here, the purple, the instructor was tweeting a lot, so the students kind of follow that model that the instructor was using. And this was probably a Friday, because that's the day that the class met, so every Friday, you'll see that there's a bunch of spikes. Now, June 10th
yeah, so this is getting towards the end of the spring term, so it's kind of the midpoint.
Right.
So they're kind of fizzling out, as am I.
Yeah, that's like week 10 of the term. So we're on quarters and 10 weeks.
I'm tired of tweeting.
Here's the tweet.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could kind of see.
And we did keep going with this, but this was when our study ended, and we did our presentation in Vegas shortly after that.
Yeah. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, but you know, one thing I did want to talk about earlier when Cheryl had mentioned about the other instructor tweeting, or the fact that they haven't been doing this since. So again, the instructor really sets the tone. So let's say you have a class. Well, I'm just going to use the example of aviation that I used earlier. So let's say you had an aviation 101 class or something, right? The history and current state of affairs in aviation. Well, let's say that you thought every time this class runs, students really ought to engage in Twitter because there's always something going on in the airline industry and aviation, all this stuff. Well, if you've got all these different instructors, so let's say you're holding 6 sessions of that one Aviation 101, because you've got a huge aviation program, right? And then the next term, you get 6 more sessions in the next term. And you've got a whole variety of faculty that are coming in and out and doing this. It's very hard to implement this if the faculty aren't really bought into the whole Twitter thing. Because my colleague Phil, that I co-taught Capstone, I don't teach Capstone anymore, I handed it off to other people, and I knew this would probably die with it because I was more dedicated to this, and it's more my thing than it is my coworker Phil. So Phil did have a Twitter account, and every once in a long while he will tweet something related, and he's a former restaurateur and understands, you know, hospitality, restaurant industry. So he does tweet stuff that's relevant to that, and students follow him. But it's no longer an assignment, it's no longer incorporated into the class, and so it's pretty much non-existent. I'm the one who controls the KC Capstone Twitter account, so I can tell you nothing's gone out on it in months. I've probably tweeted maybe twice in the last 6 months or so from it. But if there's an instructor, and I'm hoping maybe we can reintroduce that with, you know, like our colleague Rob. Rob might be a good person who could reintroduce this notion with the students, because I think the positive stuff that came out of this was really great. Now, out of the 65 students, I will also say that probably about half of them ever even bothered to comply with just basic step 1, which was create a Twitter account and follow us. I don't know if I ever went and did the math on that, but if I had to just, you know, scanning the audience and thinking of who I know is on Twitter, probably, you know, 40 to 50% never even bothered. And then the ones that did, I'd say probably 20% of the class were fairly active. And then you had that other bit that would, every once in a while, when I would send out an email reminding them to tweet, there might be one tweet from that person. And it would be like, I don't really know what I'm doing here.
So wasn't a requirement?
No.
Not in this class. In some classes, it is a requirement. And I think the more required it was, the more the students hated it. Because then it was like, you had students who really didn't understand it. Because I didn't require it, the ones who did it loved it. But the ones who didn't really want to do it, they kind of got away with that, so no harm, no foul, right?
Did you see a trend, and I don't know your student demographic, but you have older students, was it more likely for younger students to sign up?
In this particular class, it's mostly younger students, not necessarily traditional age. I'd say probably an average age of 23, 24.
Yeah, they're seniors in their program. I taught
Yeah.
a class where they're all incoming freshmen. And so they're all, what was called traditional age students, 18, 19.
And there were definitely some older students in some of our classes. Our ECE program has a lot of older students, early childhood education. Did anybody in ECE do the study?
Yes, Lori McDuffie.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so-
she had really great results too.
Well,
And
the
it's
other
in an
thing-
online class.
I was about to say, I think
so it's a
probably
little bit
because it's an
different.
online class, and I think there's a little more of an expectation of we have to do online stuff.
Yeah.
Right? When you're trying to do this in an on-ground class, I think that's also part of it. Like, I have to, I'm here, I send my butt in the seat, why do I have to do anything online?
Yeah.
And increasingly, we're requiring them to do discussion boards and other things online, even with their on-ground classes, so.
Now with my freshman class, it was a gen ed class, which our professional bound students hate general education. So this is kind of a made up general education. It's not English, it's not math. It's INT 110, which is integrative studies. And they're like, what does that even mean? So we try to get our students to look at our core competencies. And one of our core competencies is environmental stewardship. So, and because Kendall is a certified green school, we try to get our students into that mindset. You come to Kendall for a reason, and that's usually part of it. So my students had to look for green resources around the school. So the first day that I introduced the Twitter study, and this is always kind of fun, I tell them, okay, get up, take your device, and go run around the campus and find what I called environmental offenders and environmental defenders. So an offender might be somebody who's throwing garbage on the ground or running water faucets or something, anything on campus. And a defender would be somebody recycling or the recycling bins or any number of things going on campus. And here's the funny part, one day I ended up on the environmental offenders list because I was passing out pieces of paper. And there's me on the Twitter stream, I'm like, oh, you're kidding me. So, they had a lot of fun with it, and they ran around campus and took pictures of all this stuff. Here's our recycling bins, it's like, yay. So, to get them used to using this kind of stuff, you kind of gotta let them go. They're like, really, we can leave the classroom? It's like, yeah.
Just come back.
Yeah, come back. You got a half an hour to do this. They were outside. They were down the block. They were all through the building. Because Kendall is one building, so in springtime you kind of want to get them out of the building occasionally, especially after a winter like this. But they kind of embraced the tweeting in this class. They were freshmen and very, very malleable, which is awesome. So
Yeah.
you know.
So we did have some technical issues. You probably
Oh,
should
sure,
tell
I'll talk
better.
about the fun with the technical issues because, everybody's professional with technology, right? Well, our Twitonomy, the data only became available for 9 days. So every week I was on there pulling the data out of Twitonomy before it would disappear. And this is through no fault of the tool, but it's a Twitter restriction. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. There's billions of people using Twitter, generating billions and billions of pieces of data every single day. I think about how often I tweet, and it's like maybe 5-10 times a day. And it's like, okay, if I'm doing that, and Aurora's doing that, and you're doing that, and everybody's doing that around the world, there's only so much data you can actually hold. So they put this enforced restriction on it.
So you got to imagine for academics and research.
Yeah.
That's very.
And we
very
were a little
frustrating.
surprised. It's like, oh, everything went away. So yeah, every Monday morning.
Especially if you're going to rely on it to grade your students. That was, and I'll tell you back to your question about was it required. One of the challenges, first of all, because it was a study and we were kind of experimenting, we didn't want to make it required across the board. But another thing is that the administrative nightmare of requiring it in a class of 65. Now, if you've got 10, you can do that without even writing anything down. But with a class of 65, the tools, I just didn't have the tools at my disposal to translate a roster into Twitter accounts, into did you comply? It would have taken a lot of time, so no.
Right, so it actually Twitonomy kind of helped us with that. I could set up the hashtags that each instructor was using in their class. So that was part of the requirements on the instructors. Okay, give me your Twitter handle, give me the hashtags you're using for all the classes you're teaching. So I could set up these modules, I guess they're called, in Twitonomy, and so I could kind of monitor and pull the data. And you could actually download it as a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, which was very handy. Except then, you know, I had to go through it. Well, you know, it is what it is. For whatever reason, all the time when you do a Twitter search, it doesn't return everything. Now, I never figured that out, and you know, I can't tell you how many times people will come into my office. I tweeted this, but it's not showing up when I do a search, and I'm like, I don't have that answer. You know, it's like, okay, keep tweeting. Maybe if you tweet a lot, then you'll see yourself more, and that generally happens.
Yeah.
So the more you tweet, the more you get pushed up in Twitter as a, you know, I don't know, supreme tweeter or something. I don't know. We were making up all kinds of stuff. So they weren't showing up at first. The more you tweeted, the more your tweets showed up on the streams. We used in Blackboard something that would actually show live tweet streams in a module. But Twitter alters the code all the time. And they do this because for security reasons. And so our streams would go dead all the time. It's like, all right, forget the Blackboard piece. And we found a bunch of different kind of tools that would actually show live Twitter feeds. We'll show one today that I found yesterday that's really cool that didn't exist last year. We have a campus conference that at Kendall. And we had a live Twitter stream at that conference last year. And wouldn't you know it, there was a little bit of porn popping up in there. It's like, why? So we had to get rid of our Twitter stream because, you know, it's like, you know, come on, people, this is, you know, and it was a very exclusive hashtag that we were using, but some knucklehead found it. It's like, oh, so you kind of have to.
There's nothing pure and sacred.
There is nothing sacred.
Not on social media.
Yeah, and you know, how many, yeah, so yeah, it's social media. It goes back to that, you know, first thing, nothing's private. And then the data analysis. We were able to pull all of the Excel spreadsheets and kind of code the different types of tweets that our students were doing. Was it an atta-girl? Or was it, you know, sharing a resource out on the internet? You know, was it tweeting, you know, student-to-student engagement, student-to-faculty engagement? So we kind of looked at all that and kind of determined what kind of tweets they were.
But that's very sort of qualitative and manual.
Yeah, so yeah, very manual. You know, if you're doing any kind of qualitative study, what we mostly looked at were amounts of tweets. You know, compared to student amounts of tweets compared to faculty tweets and things like that. So we kind of looked at that overall from our Twitonomy tool, which we actually. Oh gosh, if we do, not if, but when we do this again. And actually in my business technology class this past winter, I used Twitter, and to varying degrees of success. I'm
going to use it next term.
Yeah, I rolled it into my student participation grade. So this was a face-to-face class. Students had to show up in class. A requirement was, you know, more of the current events type. Go out and find great resources. They had an assignment called the next big thing, where they had to invent something that was going to take over the universe. And they had to find like companies doing something that their next big thing was going to do. We had autonomous cars and different, what was it called, the kinetic whiz?
And the sorgometer.
And the sorgometer. It's like, okay. But they wanted to solve world hunger, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So, but they came up with some really good things, and it was actually kind of a big project, which I still have to grade. But anyway, so that was part of the participation grade, and they were amazed at how many great ideas they could actually find out by doing what I call crowdsourcing. So they could actually tap into other people out there and build on those ideas, which is really important in the entrepreneurial world. So these are the things that we really need to focus on when we're implementing Twitter again. More training, and hopefully we'll succeed with this session that we'll talk more about how do you use hashtags, how do you retweet something, and why would you retweet something. More training on that. We had 2 training sessions for the faculty who were involved. Second training session, not as many showed up. And it's like, okay, and those were the lesser tweeters. Is that a term?
Yeah, I think so.
We just make stuff up as we go.
You get to do that in social media, right?
That's right. Every day's different.
Lesser tweeter.
Help our students understand why we're using Twitter. Oh, Professor Boncoria, this is just something else you want us to do. Well, yeah, but here's why. So you give them the why so that they understand how to implement it and how they can embrace it in their own life. And we'll talk about that because I had a Twitter account, I don't know, I forgot, 2007 I created one. And I didn't use it until probably 2012, end of 2012. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool for teaching. And then I came up with this whole Twitter assignment that we'll go over. And I was like, oh, this is really kind of cool. And you could do this and do this. And it kind of morphed into this study. So being clear and giving the students the why you're using Twitter. And don't assume, and we talked about this a little bit before the session started, don't assume your students are all tech savvy.
Yeah, this was one of the surprises of the study, that even the younger students were like, oh.
Yeah, they're just not. They use what they use, they like what they like,
Right.
They don't question it, and they don't understand how to use it for bigger purposes, for learning and critical thinking. So that's our job as teachers, to get them through that critical thinking piece.
Which very much ties into this too. They're
Oh, right.
very much wanting a precise formula for what a tweet should be.
Yeah.
Give me the checklist. Again, we said that earlier, right?
Yeah.
Give me the precise checklist to get my passing grade and move on. And so they would be very intimidated because they didn't know they were going to be wrong. But this is something that we find frequently when we do any kind of problem-based learning with students, that there usually isn't a right or wrong. It's more about process. It's more about commitment. It's more about kind of all the things we deal with real world every day, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't have a precise formula of how to do my job correctly. I've never been given that. I have to kind of just figure it out every day. Sometimes I'm wrong-ish, and sometimes I'm really right. Most of the time I'm really right.
And if they don't know I'm wrong, then so much the better. But that's right. And and that's how this whole Twitter study came about, because I kind of, just dipped my toe in a little bit, and it's like, well, let's try this and do this. And it was just like, oh, that didn't work at all. So then you kind of tweak, and if you have the belief that, oh my gosh, this is a great tool that really should be tapped into, then you could keep evolving. And that's what happened, and that's how we ended up kind of here. So that's it's the way teaching and learning goes, right? It's all part of it. Oh boy, 1 year later, who's still tweeting? Well, I am.
I think not a lot of the ones that originally tweeted are still tweeting.
Yeah, I have to tell about John.
Yes.
Oh, John Freck is he's our star pupil. He's like, I don't know about this Twitter. I don't think I want to do it. I don't know. So I said, he's like, I don't want to, do you know how many John Frecks there are on Twitter? I couldn't even get my own name. So we came up with the handle.
Johnny Econ, right?
Just economics. So he's Johnny Econ. And when I heard that, I just burst out laughing. I was like, that is just too perfect.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I'm going to try it. He, to this day, is implementing all sorts of social media in his classes. He
doesn't tweet much, but he really does push his student. Blogs is the big thing. He really got into using blogs. So
and
I think that's probably as a result of doing this, just getting him more comfortable with alternatives.
Just using tools, and that's why this graphic is here, because there's all these different social media platforms. And if Twitter isn't it, that's okay. Think about how other social media can be used. It's not just for, posting your party pictures. And I always tell my students, I don't want to see that, really. I don't care what you do. I don't want to see I don't want to see that. So it's how you implement any of the social media to connect with your students. Think about it in academic terms and kind of make it work for whatever your class topic is.
And to that point, I think one of the great things about using something like Twitter and forcing them outside of, or LinkedIn, I years ago built a class that students were required to use LinkedIn. So I said everyone in the class has to create a LinkedIn profile. If you don't already have one, you have to join groups and you have to connect with each other and add experiences during the course of the class, right? So whatever it is, whatever the platform is, I think that a lot of it is about, we're talking about college students who are transitioning from being just purely sort of social oriented to being professionals, right? In some field, whatever it is. And this gets them to thinking about, hopefully, a little bit more about their reputation and image and what they project into this digital world we live in. Moving from the, oh my God, I can't believe the stuff you say on Facebook, to, did you know employers can see that? Even when you don't think they can. Are you aware of your presence in this digital space? And so I think that we are really doing a service to our students by pushing this sort of activity, because it does get them to shift their thinking around these tools into more of a professional mindset.
And that's actually an assignment you could give your students. Have them Google themselves. And if you haven't Googled yourself, you probably should. Yeah, some things are in there. So, and in fact, that is something that I do in class. I'll Google me, and showed up on the screen, and I'm like praying, oh, please. I don't know what's going to pop up here.
That last trip to New Orleans. Yeah. Oh, yeah, so, that video that you took of me in Vegas, that's not.
Yeah, no. What happened in Vegas stays in Vegas.
I've Googled myself, and for me, there's a lot of good things, but there are other Troy Hardens in the world.
Oh.
It's like all kind of. There's a guy who shot somebody.
Oh, wow. Not me.
It's like, and the good thing, the pictures are there too. So
there's a Lieutenant General James Kowalski. He's always in the news, I guess. So
that could be you.
I'm covered pretty
much.
Yeah, there's only one Cheryl Von Corey. It's not a really common name.
So, your turn. Should we take a break for a few minutes or
Yeah,
something
yeah.
like that? Okay, and then we're gonna,
Stretch
and then it's, don't escape, don't go anywhere. This is gonna be easy and fun.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna do a little bit of this tweeting yourself. We'll make it very easy. You all have devices or laptops. It's gonna be very easy. We'll have fun with it. So
your very first tweet.
do you remember the day? Yeah, so maybe just like a 5-minute break.
5-minute break.
Okay.
Little bio break. We have lots of questions. Don't be nervous.
No, I'm not nervous. I'm just getting used to the whole technology thing.
It's a whole different language
It
too.
is definitely a whole different language. I teach a freshman seminar class. So,
Great.
and you said expecting students to know certain things because they are the generation why the technology is amazing to me that they don't utilize it. And I'm getting an opportunity, like when I was going for my first master's, there was none of this. We physically had to go to the library.
Do we decimal what?
And they looked at me going, what are you talking about? Or when I mentioned a typewriter, I said, ooh, I forgot.
Yeah.
So let me go back, because they go typewriters.
Yeah.
Don't even know what a typewriter is. I'm like, wow.
Yep.
and everything.
They didn't know what it was?
Some of them never seen it. They heard about it.
Heard them, yeah.
So I felt like, oh my God, I am really close to I was like, oh my God.
Well, that's the fun part in my business technology class, you know, because I'm a little bit older than my students, and we talk about, you know, I had the good fortune to be there at the beginning when the Macintosh was first invented, you know, because I was in the printing industry and we didn't have computers, and then for whatever reason, I was able to use the Mac, and it just came to me naturally, and I'm like, okay, this is weird, and that kind of launched multiple careers for me. So I talked to my students, and one of our case studies is Apple, and they're like, well, there's always been Apple, and I'm like, no, you know, and how our lives have really changed. It changed how we connect with each other, it changed how we calendar, it changed how we, you know, plan our days, and they're like, really, you didn't do that before? It's like, no, I had to write it down, you know, and I laugh when I see these kind of notebooks. And I'm like, oh, I remember those, you know, and I show my students.
They laugh, they go, oh, what's this? Are you all right? I said, no. We live all this. I said, the fun part that I'm having, I'm going back to get my second master's, is that I can sit in my house with a cup of coffee and go many places.
There you go.
And
Isn't it amazing?
Wonderful, you know, or have my phone in the classroom and actually it be to tell me, okay, you're coming to your time, you kind of close. I'm like, this is so amazing to me. And they look at me because it's amazing to me.
Yeah.
And then I just thought, what did we do before all this? Because I was going to ask, what did we do before the computer? What did we do before the cell phones? Because the cell phones,
yeah, the big blind.
it was big, man, it was big. I'm like, and now you got stuff, and I'm fascinated when I'm on the phone and doing this, and I can pull my Facebook and I can do, I'm like, this is a whole lot of something.
Yeah.
And they just sit, but they don't utilize it as much, and you're absolutely right. They really don't take advantage of what they have.
Right. They use it for Facebook or whatever social media.
Right, but it really is a wonderful tool if you know how to use it. And just disgusting.
Oh, and they hate when we make them use it for work.
I know.
That's the best part. It's like,
yeah, it is.
So, yeah, and I'll ask the students in class, you know, what do you think this is and how does it connect to whatever? And they're like, oh, I was like, all right, take out your devices right now, let's look at it. And, you know, it's not about the students knowing or memorizing, it's knowing how to access it.